After King Kong vs. Godzilla was a hit, Toho wanted to make another film where Godzilla duked it out with another well-known, pre-established monster. They chose Mothra, who they owned the rights to and had been popular since her 1961 solo film. Ishiro Honda returned to direct the film. On top of that, Akira Takarada, who played Ogata in the original '54 film, stars in this film as a different character named Ichiro Sakai. Another returning actress, or rather actresses, were a famous singing duo known as the Peanuts, who had previously played the Shobijin in the original 1961 Mothra film. Composer Akira Ifukube wrote the score, reworking themes from the original Mothra. The legendary special effects director, Eiji Tsuburaya, oversaw the creation of the Mothra and Godzilla suits. A new Godzilla suit was created by Teizo Toshimitsu with input from actor Haru Nakajima, which the idea behind that was to make movement much more easier and specified to his needs. Another idea was to give Godzilla a more menacing and villainous appearance. Ironic, because that was the same intention with the previous suit from King Kong vs. Godzilla. And if I'm being honest, that one looks more menacing than the Mothra vs. Godzilla suit. Speaking of the King Kong vs. Godzilla suit, it was actually reused in this film for some of the water scenes. Extremely expensive optical printers helped to enhance Godzilla's atomic breath. The set design and destruction scenes took several takes to perfect, and Mothra's wings and other mechanical parts were controlled remotely to bring the kaijus to life. This is such a major step up from the composite work on King Kong vs. Godzilla, which had these fuzzy blue borders around anything being composited into the shot. Thankfully, those fuzzy blue borders are entirely absent from this film. Now, here's the thing, I've always had an odd relationship with this movie. As a kid, I weirdly hated it. I know it sounds bizarre, but let me try to explain. When I was a kid, I just hated Mothra as a character. I found her to be annoying cannon fodder that had a very boring design. I thought the Shobijin were obnoxious, but most importantly, I couldn't stand how Godzilla lost to what were essentially two baby caterpillars. It always drove me nuts when people claimed that Mothra vs. Godzilla was a classic and one of the best of the Showa era. According to little kid me, this was an extremely overrated Godzilla movie with a boring enemy for the big G to fight. Before actually sitting down to watch this movie for this very retrospective, I was straight up ready to be like, this is the most overrated Godzilla movie from the Showa era, but I am very happy to report that I absolutely loved this movie and had a great time watching it. So, without wasting any more time, this is Mothra vs. Godzilla. After a typhoon strikes Kurata Beach, photographer Junko Nakanishi and writer Ichiro Saki find a strange object while searching through the debris. Nearby, a massive egg washes ashore, creating a stir among the locals. Professor Miura examines the egg, but businessman Kumayama buys it to exploit it for his company, Happy Enterprises. Kumayama, backed by the wealthy Jiro Torahata, plans to build a tourist attraction around the egg. The Shobijin, tiny twin fairies, appear and plead for the egg's return, revealing it belongs to Mothra, an ancient deity. They warn that the egg will hatch a destructive larva, but Kumayama and Torahata ignore their pleas. Ichiro Saki writes articles condemning Happy Enterprises, but the company continues with its plans. Miura discovers the object found on the beach is highly radioactive. The trio returns to Kurata Beach, where Godzilla emerges from the mud, awakened by the disturbance. Godzilla begins a destructive rampage, and the JSDF's attempts to stop him fail. The trio then travel to Infant Island to seek Mothra's help. The islanders are initially unwilling, but Mothra agrees to help, despite being near the end of her life. Meanwhile, Kumayama, desperate after losing everything, confronts Torahata, but both meet their end when Godzilla destroys their hotel. Godzilla reaches Nishi Beach and prepares to destroy the egg, but Mothra intervenes. Despite her efforts, Godzilla overpowers her and she dies beside the egg. The egg hatches, revealing twin larvae, who pursue Godzilla to Iwa Island. They encase him in silk, and Godzilla sinks into the sea. With Godzilla defeated, the larvae and the Shobijin return to Infant Island. The opening sequence of Mothra vs. Godzilla sets the tone for one of the most visually impressive entries in the Godzilla franchise. The typhoon scene in particular is nothing short of spectacular. It showcases some of the finest miniature work that Eiji Tsuburaya has ever produced. The intricacy of the models, the attention to detail, and the way the destruction feels palpable despite being a scaled-down version of the world are just testaments to Tsuburaya's mastery. Even 60 years later, this scene holds up as one of the best in the genre. rivaling modern special effects with its realism and craftsmanship. One of the film's most fascinating aspects is its focus on the news media and their perspective on the events unfolding. Up until this point in the Godzilla series, we've largely seen the scientific community and the military as the primary lenses through which we experience these massive creature battles. Shifting to the news media provides a fresh angle, offering insight into how the public perceives and processes these monumental events. While we did get a taste of this with Raymond Burr's character in the Americanized version of Godzilla 54, here, the focus is squarely on the Japanese media, making it a more grounded and culturally resonant choice for the film's narrative. The scale of Mothra's egg is something that the film conveys masterfully. The decision to constantly place characters in close proximity to the egg ensures that we, as the audience, fully grasp its sheer magnitude. It's a simple yet effective visual technique, reinforcing the grandeur and importance of the egg to the plot. It should be noted too that the sense of awe surrounding this massive object adds a bunch of tension, because we don't really know what's inside, unless you've seen Mothra 1961, but still. Mr. Kumayama, the greedy businessman, is a classic take on the archetype, and his character feels like a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and greed. In many ways, he parallels characters like the mayor from Jaws or Jupe from Nope. Individuals who see financial opportunity in spectacle, even if it comes at great risk. However, unlike Jupe, Kumayama lacks any redeeming qualities, coming across as a far more selfish and short-sighted character. His obsession with capitalizing on the Mothra egg, turning it into an amusement park attraction, is absurdly short-sighted, and yet it feels entirely believable in the context of his character's greed. Like, seriously, dude, what are you thinking? It is an egg. It is going to either rot or hatch. Why do you want to build something around it? Like, genuinely, you could say it's a plot hole, but I think it works really well with just how dumb his character is in terms of, like, just thinking in the long term. He represents that, like, capitalist drive for profit at any cost. His schemes revolve around exploiting the kaiju phenomenon for financial gain, which eventually leads to his tragic downfall. His actions are driven by the desire to control and monetize Mothra's egg, reflecting a broader commentary on how the relentless pursuit of wealth can have dire consequences. Godzilla's entrance in this film is one of the most unique in the entire franchise. Rising up from beneath the ground after the tsunami, his emergence is both terrifying and unexpected. We've seen him come from the ocean before, but this subterranean arrival is something else entirely, giving the moment an added sense of dread and unpredictability. The accompanying music heightens the moment, with Akira Ifukube's score seamlessly blending with the visuals to create a sense of impending doom. Ifukube's score throughout the entire film is a masterclass in film composition, from the iconic Mothra theme to the more subtle incidental pieces that perfectly capture the mood of each scene. As a little side note, something that I really want to add is that my second feature film, Pesticide, actually included this scene very, very briefly as a little homage during the opening titles. For those that may not have seen the movie, which I'm sure is a lot of you, it's this sort of collage and montage of all these weird public access TV shows, music videos, and public domain horror movies. As a little homage to the Big G, I threw that clip in for just a few seconds because it's always stuck out to me. It's so weird for him to come out of the sand, but it weirdly works. I don't know, there's just something about it that is so terrifying, yet just so cool and interesting to look at. There are several moments of pure visual spectacle in this film, but one of the most striking is the sequence where we hear an announcement over the loudspeaker as we get wide sweeping shots of Japan. The sense of scale is immense, especially in the shots where we see Godzilla looming over the landscape, moving across the bay with soldiers helplessly looking on. While the effects may show their age in some places, Godzilla's movements, for instance, can feel a bit stiff. There's an undeniable artistry in the way he's composited into the real-world settings. The movements of his tail in particular brings to mind moments from Shin Godzilla, where the creature's unnatural yet menacing tail became a focal point of its design. The destruction Godzilla brings to the city is, as always, chaotic and terrifying, yet this time it feels more grounded in reality. The panic that grips the population is palpable, with people running in every direction as the military tries to maintain some semblance of order. The panic that grips the population is palpable, with people running in every direction as the military tries to maintain some semblance of order. There's a sense of confusion and disarray that feels much more authentic compared to previous films. This is further amplified by the fact that Mothra vs. Godzilla is one of the first times we see Godzilla wreak havoc in full color. Yes, we saw this with King Kong vs. Godzilla, but here we get a lot more of it. And let's talk about Godzilla here. The design in this film is menacing with a look of fury that makes him feel truly dangerous. While this may not be the best suit design in the franchise, it's certainly one of the most imposing of the Showa era. The darker tone of the suit coupled with Godzilla's angry expressions reinforces his status as an unstoppable force of nature, a destructive creature that cannot be reasoned with or stopped. Mothra, on the other hand, is treated with reverence and respect. The film builds up to her appearance in such a way that she truly feels mystical and awe-inspiring. The sequences of the Shobijin praying to Mothra and singing to her are some of the most beautiful in the film, creating an atmosphere of wonder that contrasts starkly with the chaos of Godzilla's rampage. These moments evoke the same sense of grandeur as the reveal of the Brontosaurus in Jurassic Park. We see the human characters' reactions first, and only then are we treated to the spectacle itself. It's an effective technique that makes Mothra's eventual departure from Infant Island feel momentous. One of the film's greatest strengths is its dual plot structure. On one hand, we have the story of Mothra and her protectors, and on the other, the military's efforts to stop Godzilla. Both plotlines are equally compelling, never overshadowing each other. As we learn more about Mothra's mythology and the Shobijin's attempt to safeguard the egg, we're also treated to scenes of the military desperately trying to thwart Godzilla's path of destruction, and ultimately failing. The way these two narratives converge toward the climax is seamless, creating a well-constructed and engaging story. In comparison, King Kong vs. Godzilla feels haphazard in its structure, lacking the same level of cohesion and narrative focus. The resolution of the Kumayama subplot is another standout moment, really with how his death is tied directly to Godzilla's actions. The destruction of the building where he meets his end, and the fact that his own financial advisor is responsible for his demise, serves as a fitting conclusion to the film's critique of greed. It almost feels like a modern parable. Don't let greed blind you to the consequences of your actions. Despite Kumayama's downfall, Godzilla's menacing presence remains the true focus. The film wisely avoids letting the human antagonist overshadow the kaiju while still being interesting in his own right. The battle between the adult Mothra and Godzilla is one of the most dynamic in the Showa era, with real stakes and a sense of impending doom hanging over the egg. The entire time, the tension is palpable as we worry that the egg might crack open in the middle of the fight, potentially harming whatever's inside. The battle itself is thrilling, with Mothra managing to drag Godzilla by the tail at one point, a moment that is both humorous and effective within the film's overall tone. The use of stop-motion animation in certain sequences adds a unique visual flair to the fight, making it stand out among other Toho kaiju battles. The human characters in Mothra vs. Godzilla are more fleshed out than in other entries in the franchise. The performances are strong across the board, with the characters being given more depth and personality than the often one-dimensional roles that can be found in other kaiju films. A lot of people like to write off human scenes in kaiju movies, but here it is absolutely essential and works expertly in tandem with the kaiju storyline. The greedy businessmen, as well as the scientists and reporters, provide a contrast to the purity and protectiveness of Mothra. Ignoring the human scenes means missing out on the film's core themes of nature versus greed, and humanity's responsibility toward the environment. The monsters don't just appear randomly, they're linked to human actions and consequences. This, coupled with the well-executed plot and spectacular monster battles, makes Mothra vs. Godzilla not just a great kaiju film, but a great film in its own right. It balances spectacle with substance, creating an experience that feels both grand and intimate. At its core, Mothra vs. Godzilla is an engaging narrative about the clash between two monstrous forces with fundamentally different natures and origins. In one corner, we've got Mothra, a benevolent divine insect deity from Infant Island, facing off against Godzilla, the embodiment of nature's fury unleashed by human folly. I always talk about the English dub for these movies, so let's go over that right now, even though there isn't really much to talk about. American International Pictures, or AIP, purchased the rights to distribute Mothra vs. Godzilla, and they released it under the title Godzilla vs. the Thing. As much as I hate that title, I absolutely love the poster that was made for American theaters. Is it representative of the actual movie? No, but it is a beautiful work of art. It was painted by Reynold Brown, who had previously created posters for Creature from the Black Lagoon, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. According to the DVD audio commentary for Godzilla vs. the Thing, Brown was paid only $350 for the poster, which doesn't sound like a lot nowadays, but back then, when you adjust it for inflation, it would have been around $3,500. Getting into the English dub itself, it's kind of bizarre. Certain scenes are outright removed. The most glaring omission is Kumayama getting shot in the hotel room. It makes no sense why they would do this, since it outright ties into the themes of the film. However, there are some decent changes that I do like. For one, the Shobijin song is shortened greatly. No disrespect to the Peanuts, but Godzilla films have a bad habit of letting these songs just play out to pad the runtime. Trust me, we'll get to the King Caesar song eventually. I like the song, but it just goes on for way too long in this movie. So it's a welcome change that streamlines the film, and it's a shame that more important scenes were cut out or flat out removed. So, yeah, Mothra vs. Godzilla is a certified classic and one of the best entries in the Showa era. I have no idea what I was thinking as a kid. It just goes to show how kids can have such garbage taste in movies or just outright hate a movie for the dumbest reasons. The film stands out not just for its impressive kaiju battles, but for its commentary on human greed. Through its narrative and character arcs, the film explores the destructive consequences of pursuing wealth and power without regard for the natural world. It presents a cautionary tale about the need for ethical responsibility and respect for nature, positioning itself as a thoughtful and enduring entry in the kaiju genre. Really quick before we wrap this up, I want to give an important channel update. Don't worry, I'll make this very brief. Next week, on Friday, September 27th, I'll be releasing Restricted Zone. It's a kaiju short film that I directed, edited, and did the VFX on. It's a project that I'm extremely proud of and can't wait for all of you to see. Now, in October, I'll be taking a bit of a break from kaiju content. Every year, I do this series of 31 horror movie reviews. Last year, the theme was stop-motion monsters, and the year before that was the history of horror. This year, the theme is franchises. I'll be reviewing every movie from Alien, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween. After that, I'll be premiering a new analog horror series on the channel, which will then lead into a feature film that debuts on Halloween. I don't want to talk too much about this, but if you follow us on Instagram, you might have seen this sneak peek from the series. Again, not giving much away, but this is one of the most insane projects that I've ever worked on, and I'm so unbelievably proud of it. Once we reach November, we're going all in on the Godzilla retrospectives. They'll start being posted on a weekly basis, so ideally, the entire retrospective series should be completed by late June or early July of next year. Regardless, I'm Cole McCormick, you're watching Firewood Media, and I will see you in the next one.